So I want to share with you something that I just learned about why we have a nervous system. Not just us, why the nervous system emerged in the first place. So you might think, well, of course there has to be a nervous system for any kind of animal or any kind of cell, because it has to respond to the environment and it has to move and it has to, figure out where to go and like catch predators and ingest food and all of that. But actually there are some animals and definitely single-celled organisms that don't need any of that. So for example, you can have a bacteria with this is like a flagella. It rotates it to move. So this bacteria could sense chemicals, like some sort of chemical. So you have like a chemical source over here, and this bacteria could figure out to move over there. It could figure out to run away from like a different source of chemical and go that way. So it already could do some basic processing. It could say, I want this, I don't want that, and I want to run away. So it can move, so it can actuate, it can sense the environment, and it can maybe find food and go towards the food by sensing the chemical concentration and like maybe ingesting it and like processing it. So it already can do some basic processes. Multi-celled organisms like sponges, they also don't have a nervous system. So you have like a bunch of them like this. Imagine these are cells. This is just like a cartoonish way. So imagine it's like single cells stuck together. These would be called independent effectors, in that they are basically like muscle cells. They can contract based on a stimulus. So already they can process the environment. They can see, oh, there's like some sort of chemical here, or there's some sort of food. Let me do something. So they can contract. So they can respond to the environment. So why would these guys, they can just sit there. They can like do some basic motions. They can like ingest food. They can like make defenses against other creatures that come to them. So they can do some basic stuff. So why would they evolve a nervous system? Why would they specialize to a nervous system independently that does the sensing and the actuation, and a muscle system that just does the actuation? So to think about that, let's think about this other animal called hydras. So they look like this. These are like also very simple organisms that do have a nervous system. They have simple nervous system, and the way they move, like their mouth is over here. And like one way they move is that, like they somersault. So it does like this, and they collect food or something, and then like this, and then they continue the motion, and then they're like that. So they're basically doing somersaults. They're moving. But you notice here, what's different from here actually, these guys, when they detect some chemical, this one responds. It doesn't respond like with this one and that one and that one. There's no central conductor. They respond, they're independent effectors. So they just respond, they contract based on some stimulus. Of course, the stimulus could be, they could sense the force from their neighbors. So if this one starts to contract, this one feels it and contracts, right? So that way you can transmit the information physically, by physical forces. This contracts, that one contracts. Maybe by chemical diffusion they can sort of interact. Like this one absorbs these chemicals and then emits other ones that go to other cells and then causes that. But that would be a slow response. So these guys are very poor at coordinating action. So they can't do something like this. In this case, all the muscles are deciding to move at the same time. So that's why you need some sort of specialized nervous system that does that for you. So the simple plan of the nervous system of the hydra is you have these in the middle cells. So let's say you still have these sort of muscle-like cells, right? But these muscle-like cells, now they can start to say, so these muscle-like cells in the sponge, they need to do two things. One is they need to sense the environment and contract. So they need to do two things. So maybe if they specialize, one could be really good at contracting and the other one could be good at sensing the environment. So you start to have independent cells. Some of these guys start to specialize into, let's call them sensory neurons. So these guys now are the ones responsible for sensing. Okay? So what is the advantage of this specialization? One, is now these guys could focus on one thing, these guys could focus on another thing, and then they can start to become better and better at sensing. So effectively, these guys work like an amplifier. They can respond to much lower levels of the signal than these guys can. These guys need a bigger signal to respond. These guys act as an amplifier, and they need only a small signal. And then they can coordinate the action. They can send their effects to many different cells at the same time. Okay? Same thing here. It sends its effects to other cells. Okay? Another thing that you can get from this specialization is that, well, maybe you can add another sensory neuron here in a different part of the body that detects a different modality. In humans, we have ears, we have noses, we detect chemicals, we detect sound, pressure waves, we detect light. So you might start to get some sort of specialization. In the beginning, it might be simple stuff like one kind of chemical, another type of chemical, or just this one measures forces like pressure, like this one measures some sort of chemical concentration. So that would be a prototype nose and a prototype ear. But anyway, so you start to get like this sort of specialization. Okay, so they can specialize, they can amplify, they can work faster, and they can coordinate. Like this one, like with one signal, can activate many muscles at the same time. Okay, another layer of complexity would be add another layer between the sensing neurons and the muscles. Okay, I'll call these muscle cells. So you don't have these connections anymore. Okay, let me just erase them. So you don't have these connections anymore. Instead, you have motor neurons. These guys are the ones that activate the muscles. Each muscle has a motor neuron that activates it. And one motor neuron could activate a bunch of muscle cells, and the more motor neurons responds from different sensory cells. So basically, this is a very complicated or bad picture at this point, but so what we have here is like a very simple nervous system with some special kinds of sensory neurons. These guys talk to the motor neurons, and the motor neurons activate a set of muscles. And the set of muscles that this one activates would be called a motor unit. So that's just the motor neuron, the muscles it activates, that's a unit. So like maybe this is a unit. It's not really a unit probably, but you know what I mean. So one last thing, one cool thing here is that now with just this simple, you have a 3-layer neuron network, like sensing, motor, and muscle cells. So you have like connections from here to here, connections from here to here. Now you can do interesting processes. You can do like simple computations. So this neuron, for example, can say, if I get this from the nose part of the sensing and from the ear part of the sensing, if I get both these signals, then activate. So, what we do when you see something, the way you know it's real is like, you look at something, you hear it at the same time, maybe you smell it, and then that gives you, these things integrate together and produce an action. This basic simple unit here can do that sort of computation. This could say like, if this comes and this comes, then activate this motor unit. And basically that would be called this simple 3-step process from sensing to motor to muscle. That would be like a simple reflex. You see something and it triggers and it happens. Okay, so I hope you learned something here, and I'll see you next time.